Bojack Horseman. What is this? A Lightspeed Brothers video? That's going to make sense if you watch the show. Last year, I wanted to make a video about my summer with Seinfeld because that was really the only TV show I watched last summer. Yes, I watched new episodes of Better Call Saul, I watched The Bear, but that was really the only thing I binged. And so I didn't get the chance to do that last summer. I didn't really have too many interesting things to say about the show, but this summer I decided to watch all of Bojack Horseman. And so today I wanted to talk about my experience with watching all of Bojack Horseman in a summer. I think for most people, they know Bojack Horseman as the depressed horse TV show, and this might give them the false impression that it's a drama that just so happens to be animated, but I don't really think that's the case. I personally don't see Bojack Horseman as a drama that just so happens to have a strong sense of humor, at least not as much as I see it as a sitcom that has a really dark undercurrent to it, where the characters face struggles and are forced to make revelations that typically are reserved for characters in dramas. This is both good and bad. It's good because once you realize that Bojack Horseman is a sitcom, you also realize that the show is not going to be this unbearable slog of sadness to get through. It is not going to beat you down every time you turn it on. The bad of it is that the show never reaches the flow state that almost every other great sitcom has. When I think of some of the great sitcoms of all time, Seinfeld, Community, New Girl, what they all have in common is that during certain runs of those shows, there are multiple seasons where the writers and actors are so in sync that yes, the seasons are like 20-some episodes and it feels like they can go on for 10 more without feeling stale. And that's never the case with Bojack Horseman, which is largely a result, I think, of the extremely difficult balancing act the show puts upon itself. It wants to delight you like a sitcom. It wants to be as formally inventive as something like Community, but it can never stop, or at least it rarely does, and has a true bottle episode of comedy. It is almost always setting up building blocks. It is almost always building to something that's going to happen later in the season, and I think that provides for a lot of filler in almost every single season. Like almost all sitcoms, Bojack Horseman is an ensemble piece, led by the all-star starting lineup of Bojack, Princess Carolyn, Mr. Peanut Butter, Diane, and Todd. This was another surprise to me, as I thought the show was going to be such an intimate character study of Bojack that the side characters would basically have no time to shine. That is not the case at all. I take issue with Todd because of how the writers, by the time they get to the aptly titled Hooray Todd episode, are rather aware that Todd is practically just there to be a fun distraction from the show's A-plots. My thing is, Bojack isn't dark enough that it needs a character exclusively devoted to going on wacky adventures. They briefly dive into Todd being asexual and making him more of a round character, but then quickly revert him back to being a solely antics-based character. I do think that the antics get better, his series of B-plots where he fails upwards become funnier, more entertaining as the show progresses, but I was always irked the show thought Todd was enough the way he was, and his general confusion and stupidity would make him likable enough to be in the same conversation as the other leads, all of whom had way more going on under the hood. I felt the least bad for Todd out of all the characters Bojack mistreats. Hell, sometimes I felt more inclined to take Bojack's side when Todd threw things in Bojack's face after having next to no characterization for seasons on end. Now, taking Bojack's side over Todd is obviously a flaw in the show's overall mission of dealing with its anti-hero, but overall, the way the show goes about handling its bad leading man is frequently smart and occasionally spellbinding. Bojack is not the best anti-hero of his generation, but no show has addressed the shortcomings of their anti-hero quite like Bojack Horseman has. At the end of Season 2, I was ready to quit the damn show. I was ready to stop watching because of how grossed out I was by Bojack, which I can't say for any other anti-hero-led show I've watched. And yet, by the show's end, I was mystically drawn back to Bojack. I didn't just like watching the show, I liked him. I liked seeing him on screen. It's the show's defining magic trick, forcing its hero to go to new all-time lows, slowly having him redeem himself, and then just when you really start to believe in his goodness, all of his ugliness is thrown right back in your face. TV's great obsession is with change, but to me, Bojack Horseman's central question is not whether or not Bojack can change. I think Bojack does change. I think the show is more concerned with whether or not that change is significant enough to override the past misdeeds of a person. And I think the show is equally concerned with whether or not occasional reversions to our past selves completely erase the progress we personally make. The show is weighing whether or not a person should be forgiven for their past, and also wrestles with how the show itself has aided its watchers in rationalizing their own terribleness, while also being the show where Jessica Biel establishes a fire god after Mr. Peanut Butter traps everyone underground due to his newfound love of fracking in his bid for governorship of California. This is the show you're signing up to watch. Bojack Horseman takes pride in just how silly and dark it can get in a single season, but few times did I think the series suffered because the show's tonal pendulum swung too fast or too far in one direction or the other. The show's bigger weakness lies in how the writers also take pride in just how inventive they can get in individual episodes. Bojack Horseman's legacy is in part defined by its time-bending reality mindfuck penultimate episodes, barring season 2. I think the show frequently excels with trying to top its penultimate episodes. Not each one is better than the one before it, but none of them feel like noble swings and misses. They all connect, each of them function as impressive feats of animated storytelling that would lose power if told in a live-action format, and they all show the audience just how low Bojack can sink. But it's the inventive episodes that fall in the middle of the season that don't feel like high-water trademarks of the show, but risky gambles that sometimes pay off, but sometimes fall flat for me. Some of them, like Mr. Peanut Butter's booze, feel so inspired and tell me so much about a given character that I never see it as tacky. I don't see the episode as rising above the gimmick because there's no gimmick to rise above. I felt the story they wanted to tell about Mr. Peanut Butter's toxicity came before any clever attempt to structure the episode around 4 different Halloweens. Episodes like Fish Out of Water and Stupid Piece of Shit come off as doing the complete opposite in my opinion. I groaned as soon as I realized Fish Out of Water was going to be the silent episode, and the famous image of Bojack swimming with the seahorse told me everything I needed to know. This was going to be a fleeting break of Bojack's hellish existence, a rare moment of innocence and happiness that by the end of the episode he'll realize is impossible to sustain. In episodes like this, I already feel as though I'm 10 steps ahead of the show's direction, a feeling that bleeds over into Stupid Piece of Shit and even to some extent Free Churro. I dislike Fish Out of Water more, but Stupid Piece of Shit arguably commits a worse sin. It's exactly what you don't want. An idea like following a person's stream of consciousness completely overrides the episode's capacity to deliver an intricate emotional message. The episode compromises for the sake of the bit, for the sake of the gimmick, which I can't say happens in something like Good Damage, which has a similar conceit. But no matter the case, these inventive episodes that fall in the middle of the season, they could be anywhere from mind-blowingly fantastic or far too predictable and simplistic. You'll quickly learn that Bojack Horseman is a hyper-socially aware show, maybe the most tuned-in show to American discourse of its era. You could easily imagine a world where episodes exclusively devoted to these topics are intrusions on Bojack's episodic flow, but that's not the case at all. Bojack Horseman, first off, is in a constant state of commentary, so when it goes all in on a particular issue, the show never feels like it's taking a hard right into uncharted territory, unlike a show such as The Sopranos. The show's messages are frequently well thought out and show just how good the writers can be with dark comedy. It's like they transferred the very spirit of something like Dr. Strangelove into a modern show, and I love it for that. I never would have thought the show's satire would be a consistent high for me, but here I am. The writers similarly have a huge knack for wordplay and running gags. Again, never would I have thought alliteration jokes and tongue twisters would be such a staple of a series about a depressed horse, but again, here we are. Bojack Horseman is beguiling in so many ways, but when you get to the purpose of the show's existence, I think it's going to be exactly what you thought you were getting into. It's about how sad and horribly messed up people can be. It was fascinating to watch over the course of a busy, challenging summer for me because of how unlike Seinfeld it was. I watched Seinfeld in a cozy state of mind, and the show seemed to always complement how relaxed I was. In contrast, Bojack called me in a pessimistic state, which made watching its musings on depression both cathartic but reinforced negative patterns of thought. The show responded rather quickly to how it was perceived. This is plainly evident in Season 5, but I don't think it had the clairvoyance to understand how it sometimes made depression seem inescapable and potentially box in viewers looking to the show for guidance. And that's not to say Bojack Horseman had the responsibility to function as anyone's therapy, but I can't help but feel its view of depression as a natural state for people has incidentally convinced people they are more trapped than they really are. That's as highbrow as I'm going to get with talking about the show and its impact, because it's time to get down to business and, as accurately as possible, assess the show's overall quality. Season 1 of the show is commonly seen as the black sheep of the family, representing a period before the show was consistently good. I flatly disagree with this assessment. I thought the Bojack and Diane focused season was a confident start to the series that definitely had its share of fat, but no more than even some of its counterpart seasons. It also feels like no coincidence that my least favorite episode in every single season, barring 5, is in between episodes 3 and 5. The show rarely has trouble getting off the ground, but as soon as it's time to get into its groove, it gives us some bottom-tier filler episodes. Season 2 is an awesome season of television, but the ending is a little complicated. The end of Season 2 features one of the most important scenes in the show, but the episode that it occurs in is overhyped, and the seriousness of the moment flatly ruins the finale. The finale is fun, I like it, but these episodes do not work in succession, and it's maybe the only true tonal faux pas the show makes in its run. Season 3, also a bit complicated because its final 4 episodes constitute the single greatest stretch in the entire show, but it requires you to get through the show's single slowest takeoff, one of its most useless episodes in Bojack Kills, the most disappointing episode of the show's run in my opinion, and its worst social commentary episode. The 2 hours of excellence that end the season are a feat any show should be proud of, and I generally like both Spanakopita and the Bojack for an Oscar plot, but the amount of simply television that needs to be endured to get to the good stuff makes me incapable of even saying it's a step above Season 1. Season 4 is interesting. When I finished Season 4, I was ready to dunk on it because I thought Bojack and Hollyhock's relationship was the single weakest connective tissue out of all the seasons, and it may be. And I think some inconvenient episode placement tricked me into thinking the season is weaker than it actually is, but honestly, the season slaps. This is far and away the best season for Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane. The writers unlocked a new level for them by putting them into serious conflict. Ruthie isn't my favorite of the Princess Carolyn episodes, but it marked a turning point for the character. Season 4 offered this comprehensive coverage on Princess Carolyn, her desires to be a mother, her methods of exploitation in something like Thoughts and Prayers. The season elevated her character to the point where it didn't seem like such a crazy take to say she was the best character on the whole show. The season also has the absolutely crazy doubleheader of The Old Sugarman Place and Time's Arrow, 2 of Bojack's most accomplished episodes when it came to unconventionally navigating time through animation and exploring the seemingly boundless trauma of Bojack and Beatrice Horseman. The weakness of the Bojack and Hollyhock storyline keeps this a notch below Season 2, but the more I think about the season, the more I like it. Season 5 is, like Rami Malek says at the end of Episode 1, a sensational season of TV. What I find fascinating is that despite not having a single episode that would firmly make my top 10 episodes, every single episode in Season 5 is great. And that, to me, is such a rare feat in television. It's not even like, oh, there are some weak episodes, but at least important stuff happens in all of them. No. Every single episode stands as its own great story. And for the show to call its shot like that, that's worth celebration. And then there's Season 6, which I like, but it annoys me in some ways. I continue to be amazed how showrunners will split up their final season of TV just because The Sopranos did it. If The Sopranos didn't do it, no one would do it, but alas, this is the world we live in. But what is the common thread between all of these 6 A's, 7 A's? Almost without fail, they are uniformly criticized for having filler. I would be more understanding if the first half of these final seasons were comprised of episodes that had singular identities, like each one of them did something truly experimental that didn't deserve to be in the climax of the show, but was something the writers had to get out of their system. But no! Each of them are soiled by boring episodes that falsely lead you to think the show has no steam left in it, when it actually does. The show is just delaying getting to the good part. I'm still processing 6B, but I can feel right now that it's a great conclusion. I just don't think it's as impressive as some people make it out to be. I think it's worth mentioning that everything from the finale of Season 6A, Episode 8, up until Episode 12, Xerox of Xerox, flat out stunned me. I thought this was some of the riskiest television I've ever watched. You want to talk about risk-taking? How about Bojack's past slowly yet inevitably creeping up on him, having the conversations in the show reflect the discourse that had been going on in YouTube comment sections for years with that meta element to it, and also having the source of Bojack's downfall be His Girl Friday. They literally have the reporters just reenact a 1940 screwball comedy, and that is the source of Bojack's demise. Like, what? I liked the final 4 episodes as a whole. I wasn't quite blown away in the same manner that other people were, and I think this is largely a result of the first 2 episodes being a classic symptom of this 6A, 6B nonsense, where episodes that fall around the anti-penultimate episode, just like Better Call Saul last year, seem to only exist to create separation between the more eventful episodes of the final season, so not too much is being thrown at you at a single time. Episodes 13 and 14 of Bojack Horseman, like the episodes that fall in the same range for Mad Men, Saul, Sopranos, are some of the least memorable, least distinct episodes of the show's entire run. And I won't stand for this argument that these episodes serve as a necessary gap so you don't have too many action-packed episodes in a row, because first off, the highest rated seasons of all time, Breaking Bad 5, Wire 4, Thrones 4, they thrive off of being action-packed for almost their entire run. These seasons aren't burdened or penalized by the amount of awesome things that happen within them. They simply are able to cut off all the fat that is usually present within a given season of TV. And even the episodes that can function as this sort of calm before the storm manage to find their own way to stick out in something like Granite State. Breaking Bad 5 is the exception. The rule with these A and B seasons is that they have, more often than not, an hour plus of content that can be completely trimmed, and the season would be better for it. I was going to go on the offensive on The View from Halfway Down and Nice While It Lasted, but the more I think about those episodes, the more I like them. What I'll say about The View from Halfway Down is that I don't think it's a top 5 episode. I think it's awesome, but for the amount of classic TV tricks of the trade it uses, it basically gives back to the show all of the weapons it had lost beforehand. I do think it could have been a little more poignant in that table conversation and could have built up the dread of what happened at the end of the episode a little more. This could have afforded 10 more minutes to really go deeper. I mean, why not? If you're at the penultimate episode of the show, why not transfer some of that time you had in The Horny Unicorn and Angela into this episode? But let's say I bring 6A and 6B together, that means that I thought every single season of Bojack Horseman was great, and I can't say that for some of the other all-time greats of TV. I thought Bojack Horseman did some pretty amazing stuff throughout its run. It's hard to say whether I'll really miss the show, though, considering how difficult some of its sadder moments can be to get through, and how I felt like I was really battling the show to get to the good parts in multiple seasons. At the end of the day, I'm giving Bojack Horseman a Game Informer must-play certified score of an 8.75 out of 10. With a caveat, if you regard yourself as a happy person, if you are comfortable in your life, you're not too pessimistic at the moment, don't watch the show. You don't need this to mess with your psyche and make you end up at therapy, which I do think the show is capable of doing. But if that's not the case for you, I think this is a pretty essential viewing experience.